How are you doing, Adam? Okay, thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Telos Launch Group call. Again, a quick reminder, if you could please say your name and your organisation when you come in to speak, I would very much appreciate that. And if please remember that we are live streamed, so please make sure that we are on our most professional behaviour, as of course we always are, which is excellent. I'm just going to make a quick comment about voting, just so everybody is fully aware of how we do actually vote. I've made a slight amendment to the rules for voting at the top of the agenda to try and clarify this. We currently vote, and we will continue to vote, on a 2/3 plus 1 majority system. Okay, that means that the effect of an abstention is slightly different to that if we were using a simple majority system, which we are not, although you can abstain in the same way as I'll explain in a moment. A number that we are very familiar with is 21, which is the 21 block producers. And for anything to go through on a 21 on a vote at 2/3 plus 1 requires 15. That's obviously 2/3 plus 1. Now, for that to get voted in, the only number that we are bothered about is the getting over the line of 15. How you get over that line is immaterial. You've got to have 15 votes of yes. If people vote no, or abstain, or vote fly to the moon and go home, or whatever, it is irrelevant, because the only number that you are interested in is the 15 yeses. So in this particular system, an abstention notes that you are not against the system, against the motion, but you are not for the motion. So therefore it cannot add to the yes. And we've got a fixed matrix of the number of votes, which is 21. So we are voting in the same way. However, we don't have a fixed matrix of 21 or fixed number of 21. Currently, I think we had about 35 or something. So if everybody votes on the call, that is 11, because you can't have both people, 11 times 2, which is 22, plus 1, which is 23. So the yeses have got to get over that to 2/3 plus 1. That's the line you've got to go over. If you wish to abstain, you can do so by simply not voting, because then that takes down the number of votes that are recorded, and that affects the line that the yeses have got to get over. So for the purposes of these votes, if you wish to abstain, then you can write abstain, but you must realise that that will affect the yes votes. If you wish to abstain and it not to affect the yes votes, then you must just not vote, as we don't have at the moment a requirement for everyone to vote on the call. I do hope that's clear now, and we're going to revisit a couple of tips. So the only tip that it actually had any, we only came this because we had a closed vote on the last call. But as we didn't have before, that doesn't matter. But hopefully everyone now is fully aware of the power of the abstention on a 2/3 plus 1 vote. Okay, so if you want to abstain and not affect the vote, you don't vote at all. If you wish to abstain and lodge that abstention, but realising that will affect the yes vote, then you can abstain. Sorry. Okay then, so I'm going to move on, if that's okay, and move down to, if everyone could have made sure you fill in on the roll call, and then if we could look to, I've got item 3 on the agenda, which is the tips. I've noticed that we have dropped off Douglas's weekly update recently. Sorry about that, Douglas. I didn't really tell you that, but that looks like that's okay. So I think I did that unilaterally. I do apologise if that was wrong, but that looks like we're okay. So. Okay then, so we've got tip 27, and I believe Justin, I hope Justin's on the call, Justin is going to revisit tip 27 for us. The link is in the agenda, and hopefully, Justin, are you there? Can you take this away for us, please? I can't see Justin on the call. Can anybody see Justin on the call?
So this is Jan, right? But Jan is on a plane right now, so we asked somebody to
Yeah. I got a note that Justin. Hang on a minute. I've got another note here. I've got a note that Justin was going to.
Yeah, I remember seeing that it was Justin Buck that was supposed to be presenting this. I'm pinging him on Slack right now.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay if we roll on to tip 3 then, please? And Jesse, and get a vote on tip 3. Does Jesse is Jesse on the call? Can Jesse introduce tip 3?
I am on the call. Can you guys, this is Jesse from Calios. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
So yeah, the tip's basically the snapshot contract on chain to enable a smoother air grab process. Went over it last week. I think we're all pretty familiar with it, and it's well documented in the tip. So if there's any questions, let me have them. Otherwise, we can move forward.
Okay, any questions for Jesse on that one? If not, I will do the, oh God, I've made a right mess of that. I will call for a vote and a seconder. So anybody got any questions, and can I have a call for a vote and a seconder, please?
I call for a vote on tip 3.
Thank you, Douglas. Do I have a
I'll
second
if nobody else wants to.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. I'm desperately trying to find something that makes sense for me to. Why did I say tip 3? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
so,
it's one of the old ones.
Yeah, I've got it. So I'm just going to copy this into the. Okay, I'm going to copy the question into the chat, and if everyone can vote, please. Bearing in mind now everyone's fully aware of the voting on abstention. So if you could prepare to vote on tip 3, please. Shall the Telos Contributors Group adopt tip 3? Thank you.
This is Jerry Huff, Blind Block Art Mobile. I vote yes.
Can someone write that in for Jerry, please?
Yeah, I got him.
Thanks, JT. Ask Adam to do your usual results stuff, Adam, please. Looks like it's a pretty strong yes at the moment. We'll have to, at the end of the session, I will revisit what the number of votes were and the number that was needed to get over the line, and I'll post that. I won't do it on the calls. I'll do that, and I'll leave that as a record and post in Slack the results. But you can sort of glance in that you're going to be pretty okay with that. Okay, thank you very much. I'll put a call out for Justin again. Have we got Justin on the call at the moment? Any news on him, JT?
No, he is offline on Slack. I'm also hitting up Aaron to see if maybe he has a way of getting in touch with him.
Thank you. Okay then, so that's tip 27. So we've done tip 3. We're now moving on to tip 5, which is the token standard adoption. Would anybody want to just revisit that quickly, and then it has been presented, I will call for the vote as well. So Douglas, can you talk to this one?
I can, although I'd like to just ask Craig Brownscombe if he would like to instead. This is kind of his baby. Give it a minute. Okay, I'm not seeing anything there. So from Craig. So tip 5 is a technical standard we actually already are using. We have done development on this for weeks. We've deployed it both on the test net as the Telos test token, and also on the EOS mainnet as the DPOS token IBC or DPOS token. Works great. The block one is already following up with some of the similar features, but they're behind, and this is fantastic. It's a fantastic token standard. I expect to be the token standard for really all of EOCO going forward. I call for just this is something we're using. Call for a formal adoption of this, just so that we have crossed the T's and dotted the I's and accept that this is a standard.
Okay, we got a seconder, please.
I will second.
Jerry Huff from Blind Block Art will second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark or Jerry. So that's all cool, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to post I'm going to post a question into the chat. If you can just hold off putting it into the chat for a moment. I'll post a question into the chat. Shall Telos Contributors Group adopt tip 5? He says confidently he'll do that. And if you could vote, please. Thank you.
Jerry Huff, Blind Block Art Mobile, yes.
JT, you're on it again. You got a thumbs up, Jerry. He's doing it for you.
I expect we could probably move on.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yes.
I was just about to ask James to put his voting music on, but he missed the opportunity, so that was fine. I'll move on. Okay, so we'll carry on with tip 29. We've got Azad on the call. Azad, do you want to talk about tip 29, please?
Yeah, tip 29 is withdrawn. I'm basically waiting for a conclusion on the capping discussions. It does not really make sense to review tip 29 today until everyone within the community agrees on what we're doing next steps. We can reintroduce it if required, but it is withdrawn.
The dog either agreed with you or disagreed with you. I can't quite work out which it was. You're either being attacked or not. So let's think that survived the dog attack. And so at this moment, if that's been withdrawn, then we shall move on. I'll put out another call for Justin. See if we can go back to tip 27 or anybody.
I did see Aaron pop in, so he may want to do that.
Aaron, do you want to come in and talk to tip 27 for us?
If nobody else wants to come in, just so we can vote it, and this may seem odd because you know my public stance on this, I'm very familiar with this, and I think I could do a good job of discussing what the tip actually is.
That'd be great.
If no one else wants to.
No, please, Douglas, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So tip 27 anticipates the fact that there will be, that whoever purchases the first spate of RAM, the first tranche of RAM released, will receive a windfall. And if this is publicly open, there's going to be a rush to do so, and people are going to go after this and profit. Tip 27 and suggests that rather than set off a race towards speculation, and rather than allow some other party that is not affiliated with this group or working in the interest of the network, but rather in their own self-interest, that the appoint or that our elected RAM administration be allowed a special privilege in this one case to be the first to purchase RAM. It would purchase 50% of the RAM available of 12 gigabytes, and over the next hours or days would sell back into the system until it had 10% retaining. Several charts were shared, which if you haven't seen, I would be happy to screen share. I'll let everyone decide. This is, and again, I'm trying to faithfully represent Jan's point here. So, this situation where somebody is going to make a huge windfall is created by the creation of the network. We created the network. So this is not something that would occur naturally in the world. Otherwise, we have built this network at the very beginning of it. There is a one-time opportunity that somebody is going to capitalize on. Jan is suggesting that the RAM administration be able to capitalize on that for two reasons. One is it will prevent the outset of a rampant speculation in RAM, which is to the network benefit. Secondly, it will mean that the profits realized from this will go into the system and go into the Telos Foundation. And now it has been in one of the updates that Jan has added. It has been stipulated that those roughly 160,000 Telos worth of profits from that sale all be dedicated to Telos Foundation RAM grants that will be given to attract new dApps to be able to deploy on our network. There are additional protections set in for on a technical level for protections against for protections against attacks or misuse using multi-sig wallets for these amounts. Pretty much these are well thought through. JT, if you could scroll down a little bit, we can look at. So if you look, that chart right there. Yeah. So essentially, the process would be a published guidance price would be set and published during the launch pre-activation phase, so everyone would know what it was. The Telos purchase would go up to that amount. And then it would be sold back in, so that there would never be that first spike. It would actually start off high and come down and stay level is the anticipated result. This does require a one-time special privilege. The nature of this special privilege is one that could never be recreated, because there would never be another launching of the network, and it would provide this special windfall condition that is created by the creation of the network to the Telos Foundation, which it would use to distribute out funds to people trying to get onto the network. I can answer any questions.
What processes are in place here to prevent? And we're talking about insider trading through the chats, but insider trading, collusion, and essentially what we're doing is providing a group of individuals, not a system, with control of 50% of a core critical network resource in a decentralized network. Conceptually or theoretically, this tip sounds very well, but I don't see it covering those loopholes.
Great questions. Thanks, Marlon. So let me start with saying that it is providing at the initial, at the beginning of the network, 50% of the 12 gigabytes of RAM that we are releasing. is not an ongoing 50%, is a one-time purchase. So even if it were never sold, as more RAM was released, as for example, if we went to 36 gigabytes, that 50% would become, that half would become 1/6, right? Additionally, we've elected Jan. Jan has taken a pledge publicly to not trade RAM for his own benefit. I think that was all part of his. His pledge, and also is captured in the Telos Foundation governance documents that we voted on over a month ago now. So there is an element of trust involved. I think that with humans in the mix, there's no way to eliminate an element of trust. There is a certain that is offset by a certain amount of high level of transparency. So and Jan and Dacios are continuing to run as block producer candidates. So I believe that the theory, which I believe actually in this case, is if someone makes a public pledge and acts against the interests of the network, that would likely be extremely embarrassing and make people have a hard time trusting them and voting them for block producers in the future. And additionally, those pledges could be relied on by an arbitrator in arbitration. And if the RAM administrator ever were to act against the rules in such a manner, the Telos Foundation would, I absolutely expect, bring an arbitration against them to resolve the situation. So I think there are protections in place. I think removing a human element from it entirely is very hard to do. And if we want this to work well, so I think there are reasonable protections in place. I also think that the RAM, the intention of his is to sell this back down once the price, anytime the price is over the published guidance price, within his intention of hours or days. So I don't think that's an ongoing situation. I also think that this is a time when we can increase RAM at any time, the block producers can, and when the actual utilization of RAM is going to be extremely low. So really the purpose for people purchasing RAM is to, simply to increase their own account in a reasonable manner, to which probably 4 to 5 gigs of additional free RAM in the system are plenty, or speculation, which is what we're trying to discourage with this action.
This is Brett. From having watched the situation on EOS, it's been my observation, while there is no perfect answer, this is probably better than any of the other ones that have been proposed, and it's not perfect, but I think it's the best that we've come up with so far.
It's a Sayeda from Sweden Cornet. I have a question. If we buy this 50% of RAM, in which time frame we are going to sell back? Do we have any time or deadline, or it does not matter?
So in the tip, it says that 40% of the RAM, or 80% of the RAM of the 50% purchase, is intended to be sold back in hours or days, at any time that at the discretion of the RAM administrator, at any time when RAM is the actual RAM price is above the published guidance price. So it is specified. There's a clear intention there, and I think we know when that's going to happen. And that's the goal is to sell that down to 10% of the 12 gigabytes of RAM, and that actually so an interesting point here is, assuming that RAM is never sold or not sold for some time, it actually not only captures that windfall it doesn't actually capture that windfall for the Telos Foundation. It actually prevents that from being a windfall, because it will be purchased at that very low time, but it will be sold possibly never or far in the future, when RAM has stabilized and more RAM has been released. which is going to be an ongoing process and also part of the one of the strategy tools in place to watch out for speculation. So that 10% that's purchased is likely to just be held on reserve and as a protection. And of course, it will not be 10% forever, right? It will be 3% when we get to 36 gigs, right? So that's the plan. But hours to days is the intent to sell off that first section.
So if we were to vote this through, then we would have to come up with a strategy in order for Jan to be the only person to purchase RAM in order to purchase the 50%, the 10 and the 40.
Yes, and the proposal, and he has proposed in tip 27 one of two methods. One is simply to have those set aside as unstaked, and another is to simply have that transaction occur automatically on the launch. I think just having those tokens unstaked and usable is probably the simplest of these. In my case, I do see some discussion about insider trading, and I want to mention that the RAM administration and everyone working for it has taken a pledge not to trade RAM or Telos in speculative uses for anything other than just what they actually need for their own accounts.
Yeah, so sorry, go ahead.
I was just asking, is this a one-time purchase, or will there multiple transactions in order to gain 50% of the current amount of RAM?
It's a one-time. It happens one time, but it comes off in several tranches. How several 40K tranches is how it's described in tip 27.
Yeah, the sale happens in several smaller chunks, but the buy is one big chunk up front.
Yeah, I personally don't think that this will end speculation. I mean, we were all there for the EOS RAM spike, and at one point the network was up to 90% in utilization. Yeah, Jerry, go ahead.
You're right, but this, along with the knowledge that the RAM Advisory Council will increase RAM spontaneously, should prevent any speculators. And if they buy, they're going to lose.
I mean, that's speculation in and of itself, right?
No, we know what's going to happen, and we're going to be prepared to react very quickly.
Well, I respectfully disagree that this will prevent speculation altogether. But let me just share my concerns here. Number one being providing, it is the trust factor, Douglas. It's providing 50% of the critical resource on the network to one individual is, and of course, there's a pledge. We're all going to trust Jan to do the right thing, but nevertheless, we are providing a single individual with 50% of a critical resource on a decentralized network. There are methods to game this system, and the majority of us here are technologists. There are ways that we could work around this to benefit ourselves as RAM administrators, unbeknownst to many of us. And secondly, as I said earlier, this will not end speculation because 50% is still available for purchase. I believe that there will be tons of individuals who will risk speculating at the expense of potential profit. And the claim of hours to days, I think, needs to be more specific as well. So is it hours or is it days? I mean, it's a significant gap.
It would depend on those speculators. To combat the speculators, Jan would sell.
And as I take it, it is a process that starts in hours and completes in days. Is the thinking there? But by the way, Marlon, I want to say I've been trying to faithfully describe the tip because somebody needed to, and I was very familiar with it. I previously discussed my own feelings about it, and I think that anyone who has concerns about this is absolutely right to. At the same time, I actually trusting Jan is not a concern that I have. I think he's trustworthy and if personally, but I respect and I think you make very good points personally.
Hey, this is Jesse from Calios. I'd like to highlight two things. One, concerns from the community in Telegram came up about the predictability of selling and buying, and I think there were, one point to highlight is there will be a price that Jan will set. That's the price, and people can expect above that price, Jan will be selling out of the 50%, and potentially if he runs out of that 50%, he will advise the block producers to increase. So I think it should be pretty clear when to expect changes to happen, and potentially insiders or not should be able to predict that and make choices accordingly. It's not that it's going to be a big surprise. It shouldn't be a big surprise. We've made it clear what our intentions are. At this price, we will sell to maintain the price that was advised by Jan.
Right, and that's part of the reason why I said that it won't end speculation. As a matter of fact, it probably would encourage it more.
Isn't the point? Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was saying those are my main concerns with this tip.
So I was just going to say, isn't the point though that it's those very first purchases which are going to receive a windfall when they sell it, and the whole point is just to prevent anybody else from being able to make those first few vital purchases and give that privilege to the foundation RAM coordinator or administrator.
Yes, and it also means that effectively that first 40,000 Telos worth of RAM will not be sold, right? At least not in the foreseeable future, because that will remain on reserve for this purpose, for the purpose of issuing RAM grants and or the purpose of discouraging speculation. By the way, this is not intended to remove speculation or prohibit speculation. It's intended to discourage speculation in concert with a published guidance price and rules around RAM administration trading at the time, before and after that published guidance price is released. So there are actually several protections. It's entirely viable. It's entirely valid to ask, will those protections work or not? But this does not lack protections, is my assessment of it. And we do know what will happen. We do, to put me in the uncomfortable position of voting against my own position or advocating against my own position. I will say we do have a very solid control group to look at what will happen without some kind of active discouragement of speculation, and that is what happened on EOS. So in this great grand experiment of Telos, making a bold change is a way to see if this works or not. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, then the EOCO verse will know one more thing that doesn't work, right?
May I interject?
Edison knew 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
I had a question, Douglas. So as far as the not related to the one-time purchase, but specifically to the tranches, would the tranches be a reactionary mechanism when the price exceeds the guidance price? In which case, that would be a manual intervention. Okay, so good question, and I apparently didn't describe this well enough. The initial purchase is what occurs in tranches, and it is proposed that initial purchase, although it occurs in tranches, will occur before anyone else on the system has the right to do this.
So we've already allocated the money to do this. We can't. This could happen. This can and will happen if we vote against TIP 27. This can and will happen at system launch, no matter what. The only thing we're really asking is, should we provide a special privilege to be able to do this before anyone else can? Now, as to sales, those will not be disclosed. The rules around sales will be that, yes, they are a manual process. They may occur. Sales of RAM may occur anytime the actual trading price is above the published guidance price. Those are the only rules around it. It's intended to be unpredictable because unpredictability is what has the highest discouraging force against speculation.
Sales will occur at random at any time when the price is above the guidance price at the discretion of the RAC?
Yes, it won't really, not at random, at his discretion, but unpredictably.
Yeah, Arjen from Dutch Eels here. I'd just like to add another thing to the idea of this this initial buying. I think that in the public perception, this is an issue that we can see coming. We saw it already in EOS. We can expect it with Telos. And I think that the perception is also that people think it may be unfair that a random party will get this windfall that will occur with the initial buying, and that it may be seen as lack of foresight to not deal with this as Telos in some way. And I think that in that sense, this is one way to deal with this.
Okay, anybody else like to comment from someone who's from a non-technical background?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, carry on.
We have technical background, so I don't know if that excludes us from speaking now.
Yeah.
No, I was about to say I'm from a non-technical background, so I'm very confused. And if people want to keep on talking, then please do. So, Justin Marlan, do you want to speak? Carry on, please.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I'm late. I was wondering if we talked about the significance of pitching the RAM grant to the public as kind of like we're doing this for the good of the community. Did we already talk about that?
Douglas did mention that would be where they...
Right, oh, I'm sorry, Jim. Yes, that we've mentioned that would be the use of the proceeds, and that is now committed to in the tip.
Tip, right. And then also, did you guys discuss a mechanism for his idea of spreading out who can sign off on it, the multi-sig idea?
Yes, I also mentioned that there would be protections against those multi-sig protections. Yeah, we did mention that. Also,
Again, sorry I'm late. That's all I got. That's big reasons why I'm for this.
Great. I did notice that people are discussing that the RAC, which is a RAM advisory committee, would control this. And just as a point of clarification, that is not true. The RAC, the RAM advisory committee, is a group of knowledgeable people that the RAM administrator asks questions of, but they will not know in advance what these decisions are. Only the RAM administrator himself will.
Okay.
So that is not. It actually brings it down to a smaller pool of people, of one, or in the future possibly two people.
So if Jan is currently he's the interim RAM administrator, and there still needs to be an election, and we have this trust around Jan, but it's not official. So how do we also make sure that somebody else isn't elected that we don't trust? What was the process there?
Well, so we have actually elected him, right? We have elected him as interim, right?
Okay.
And so in this meeting a few weeks ago, we did elect him. He was appointed, and then he was elected. He's elected unanimously. There will be, and the reason that it has to be interim is that this is a position under the Telos Foundation, which we have governance for, and that documents why this, what the rules around this position are. but we don't actually have the voting tokens or the assigned or in place yet to be able to vote them. That can only happen after activation. And of course, this is an action that can only happen before activation. So we will elect a new RAM administrator, or we will vote to confirm Jan as the ongoing RAM administrator, and possibly the outcome of this action will be instructive there. But yeah, that's set, and there are rules around that in the document we voted on almost 2 months ago. That's essentially the Telos Foundation charter that explains what rules apply to these boards and what term limits and things like that.
Okay, unless anyone else has got anything, we have.
I do actually. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, please carry on.
So correct me if I'm wrong. The ability to sell this in order to adjust the Bancor algorithm to be within the published guidance price, they would only be able to do that a certain number of times before they exceeded the 40% initial purchase. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the intent, yes, because there's a finite amount of RAM to sell, they can only sell it a certain amount of times. And because it will depend on what else is happening in terms of purchasing, it'll only happen another time. So, for example, to illustrate this principle, if let's say the RAM administrator buys this large portion of RAM, and then for some reason the public is not interested in buying the remaining RAM, and it just goes unpurchased, then it's likely that the price will remain within, will remain basically at the published guidance price, and so therefore this hours a days would not happen. But it wouldn't happen, sale would not happen on that schedule because there's no purchasing going on, right? No people have to purchase in the way the Bancor algorithm works. We anticipate that there will be these purchases, and the recommendations to block producers to increase RAM will happen. Will also, there's multiple tools.
What's the tolerance though? At what point will the decision to sell be made? And like, how far do we need to exceed the published guidance price before there'll be a reactionary mechanic to bring it back down?
I think that is intentionally not revealed because that increases the gameability. If we set a tolerance level, then people will speculate within that tolerance level.
It just seems like we're fighting the Bancor algorithm with this. Like I understand the purpose of the system, but it seems like the sell is to keep us within a certain average price. We're just fighting the price slippage from Bancor. So why not just change Bancor as opposed to randomly selling things to keep it within the average price?
Well, we discussed this we discussed this kind of at length about the opportunities that we had to change Bancor or to eliminate Bancor, and we didn't find what we found. My understanding of what we found, because a lot of these conversations between you and I or others in the group, my belief is that we found that changing Bancor or eliminating Bancor and having some other mechanism was of unknown benefit, right? But of a high known cost in terms of time and effort and everything for a benefit that was really unknown, and almost better to take the devil with the Bancor algorithm, which may not be that bad. To me, the worst, most obvious negative about the Bancor algorithm is the beginning condition, right? The initial condition of the game. It's very gameable, which tip 27 is trying to address.
But talking about the Bancor tip, it's not within the tip. Is that correct?
No, it's not. But this is I'm just talking about this. Really, there's parallels between changing Bancor and this strategy. Changing the weight in Bancor and not necessarily eliminating it might also bring about a similar result. Is my only point, and I just wanted to highlight that so that we could better understand the rationale behind TIP 27. I'm not saying that that changing Bancor is a better or more suitable solution. I'm just only highlighting it so that we can get a better understanding of the rationale.
Right, and to address that, I believe that the changing the connector weight actually would not have a much, if any, effect on this large a buy, because the connector weight is mainly changing how swiftly actions change. This is one of the reasons why when EOS had majorly used the wrong number, I think they used 0.5. They had used 50% connector weight as opposed to 0.5% connector weight. They didn't discover it on the unit tests, because at large scales it doesn't have any actual effective change between the two. So so that is I do not believe that it would have a large effect, but Peter, obviously I deeply respect your opinion, and if you think it would, then I'm all ears.
Well, I think 50% and 0.5 are the same number, but I don't know what the connector weight would need to be, but I know that according to the Bancor white paper, if we changed the connector weight, we might be able to get a more stable price that doesn't fluctuate too much from the public guidance price, but that would require a great deal of math to discover, which I think goes back to the point that you made earlier, saying that the benefit in time versus the benefit in time in researching and changing the Bancor algorithm versus TIP 27, it was determined that TIP 27 would take less time. But I don't want to linger too much on this. I was more highlighting and less arguing.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that, and I think everybody appreciates you bringing your keen technical understanding of this. I will say that in fact, the EOS did have a problem where instead of using 50%, it used a 50% connector weight. It used it used a 50% connector weight as opposed to a 0.5% connector weight, exactly for the reason of how many zeros there were. So that did actually
0.5%. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is documented. That did occur, and Dan Larimer came out later and explained why it was not caught, and it was because of what was done on the on the unit test. So that did happen. And also, just to clarify, we did not actually look at this our exploration of the pros and cons of making significant changes to the Bancor algorithm happened long in advance, at least 3 weeks in advance of TIP 27 coming up. So we didn't actually look at them one to one, but I would say that the outcome are essentially the same as if we had.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here for a moment. We've been talking about this for a long time now, and I've let it ride because obviously it's very, very important.
I'm sorry, Jim. I just want to interject one more time. I know that Modelin wanted to say something, and he keeps getting ridden over. So maybe we want to give him the opportunity to speak once before you cut everybody off.
One little thing, Madeline Barblescu from Amplified here. I just wanted to know what everyone's willingness or openness to the idea of, this is a bit weird, but to actually having this half automated, like not give access to people directly to that RAM. Basically have a contract that holds that RAM, and the only options that you can multi-sig on is to release or hold that RAM instead of, I don't know, having an account that has access to it directly.
That's a great question. My understanding is that those are actually the only things that could be done with that RAM. RAM cannot be transferred account to account.
I believe that Jan is looking into a smart contract to control this also.
Yeah, because if we go with the idea of having a smart contract control this, and it needs to be done before we launch, because in that case it would be more safe. But to that point, Peter made a good point, because if we go down this route of making a smart contract that gets RAM and modifies how much RAM is in the game to modify the price, it's pretty much going against the basic algorithm.
Right, and that is so 2 points on that. Number one, I don't know of any actions that can be performed with RAM other than buy, sell, or hold. So I don't know that it would actually. I think that it would just be one additional layer of abstraction on him. I think that we will have a perfect record of what is bought and sold, recorded on chain. I also think that a smart contract is a possible vector for error. And frankly, at this date, I would rather. I would trust somebody who has, a master's degree in physics and a master's degree in business or economics from Northwestern's Kellogg School, and who's been a valued person in this group, more than I would trust a smart contract that we wrote in a week.
Plus the multi-sig idea.
I think additionally, though, on top of that, the contract that would control the selling of RAM to adjust the price wouldn't necessarily need to be completed by mainnet. If the one-time buy occurred through special privilege through this vote, we may not need to react and sell the token initially, which would give us time to create a pseudo-automated mechanism that could then give more implied trust to the RAM administrator and this overall idea.
I think that I think if this is enacted, I think, or if it's not, and however it's purchased, I think that moving towards something like that would be a good direction for us to go, in the future. I wouldn't hold the launch of the network for it, though.
And just one last comment. I think we're looking at 320,000 worth of Telos being invested into this. Anyone with a high number of Telos can also work against this. I'm looking at the table that Jan put together, and assuming that he's selling in 40K batches, anyone willing to risk that could simply wait until Jan sells the next 40K and buys, the same amount, and up until 40% is sold.
He's not limited to 40K chunks.
If the RAM administration controls 50% and then sells, let's say they sell 40K, right?
Right.
I think you're you're anticipating that then somebody would come in and speculate by buying basically that 40,000 worth right afterwards. I think that
that pattern can repeat. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think you're working against the fact that the RAM administrator still has quite a bit to sell.
That's my point. There could be other individuals with lots of Telos that could work against this. So if someone has 1 million Telos and Jan only has 300,000 to work with, at some point Jan's reserves essentially becomes pointless.
Yeah, but sorry, Marlon. I'm not sure whether it's difficult for me to judge whether we're talking about the sticking to the tip or not. I do appreciate what you're saying, but I'm just wondering whether we are overthinking it a little bit. The idea is to just try and get some clarity on whether we want to move forward on this tip. And I do appreciate what you're saying. And I I don't have enough knowledge to say whether that's a valid point or not. Jerry, do you want to just come in a second?
Yeah, if people with a lot of Telos come in and buy, Jan would dump all of his RAM and then have the block producers increase the RAM supply, and those people would just lose money.
So, I've got a feeling that we're talking around in circles on that, because we can talk forever on who could do what and whether someone could have 2 million Telos and vote.
Yeah, I agree with you too, Jim. I think I made my points, so I'll give the floor back to the team.
Thank you. Well,
I move to call for a vote on tip 27.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Just before I call for a seconder, I'm just going to say it's usually the job of a chair to sum up a debate and give a vague opinion. However, I don't feel particularly qualified to sum up that particular debate, and I think we're going to have to leave it up to each and everybody to put their vote. I will, however, say I usually, when I don't understand something, which I don't fully understand, I'm not sure anybody fully understands the speculation involved in here, I tend to vote with the people who I've got a lot of confidence in, and this is a very difficult vote for me because I've got a lot of confidence in people who are not arguing but are discussing from very different angles. So it is a very difficult vote. The only thing that I will say is that I have also voted for to put Jan into this position, and this is the first thing he's come up with, and I'm not trying to sway anybody's opinion, but I'm just saying we've put the guy in this position, he's put the tip out there, and I feel although I'm going to be voting against people who I've got a lot of respect for, I've also made a commitment, and I think a lot of us have, to put Jan in that particular position. So Jerry has called for a vote. I would like to call for a seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody's fully aware of the ramifications of an abstention. If you abstain, you will effectively be voting no, and you'll be registering that you are not completely against it, but you aren't helping the yes votes. If you don't vote, then you are completely abstaining from the process altogether. Okay, so let's make that completely clear. I'll attempt to paste the question into the chat. If we can just hang on for a moment, please, in the chat. So, shall the Telos Group adopt tip 27? Could you all vote now, please? That's James. Thank you so much, James. Okay, then. So that vote's going to roll on. I will ask Adam to sum up the notes, and if you could work out on the number of votes passed, Adam, if you could work out the figure needed for the yeses to actually win, so we can be very clear on that, please. Can you work out what the line is on 2/3 + 1 of the actual vote, please? So while Adam's doing that, if we can stay out of the chat for a moment, because it will be difficult. So once you've made your choice, if we just stay out of the chat for a moment, if we could start to, haven't got a lot of time left, but if we could start to buzz down the chair agendas, the chair reports, then let's do that one, please. So arbitration, any quick notes on arbitration, please?
Can I quickly add tip 31 to be voted on next week?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
On arbitration, we've completed all the paperwork, as you all know. We have 4 extremely high quality people on the cusp of signing up. They wanted to review the final paperwork, and I'm looking forward to a positive outcome on at least some of those people, hopefully all of them.
Okay, thank you for that. That's brilliant. Nothing on the badge system today. The rewards pool, there's a note in there. I take it that's from James. Yeah.
I just want to point out that the community rewards pool is going to close 1 week after activation. That'll give everybody time to post their social media links and things, or post to social media all the way up through activation, so that we can continue to get that a PR or advertising, marketing, however you want to call it out there. And then it'll give them a little bit of time to submit. We'll be posting a form for submitting their links as we get closer to activation. I want to put this out there so everybody understands the process, because there's just tons of chatter about it in Telegram.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Skipping down, the exchange outreach guys, I've got a note in there. Do you want to follow that note up, or is that note all that you need?
Well, just to say that the third exchange has been announced today in a few hours' time.
Wow.
So watch this space.
You do like to keep these cliffhangers, don't you?
Actually, I believe there's also a fourth exchange that's going to be announced within 24 hours.
Hey, we're going to be all over it like a rash.
And we have received a Genesis and vetted a from a EOS Genesis exchange their account snapshot, which seems through all our tests to be accurate. And so it looks like if that continues to go well, we will have at least one centralized exchange that held EOS, whose EOS will be released to them from the Exchange Reserve Fund upon activation, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just skipping down here. The only other ones I know anybody wants to jump in is the Telos Foundation. Douglas or Beth, you just got a quick note in there.
Beth is working. Beth,
sure, yeah.
No.
Same thing we said the last meeting. We're working on a big kind of a documentation that's kind of a proposal of how we see the board responsibilities and organization structure kind of break down. It's really for everybody's feedback. We're just trying to put something kind of consolidated together for everyone. Soon. It's a lot of pieces.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have Sayed from Sweden Cornet. I have a question about exchange. In the agenda, there was some top discussions about if we should pay to exchanges or not. And then I see now it is removed from the agenda. So
yeah, that wasn't Syed. That I don't think that's ready for public discussion. We're still discussing in the work group to figure out some sort of solution. We asked last week to have this, or last call to have it tabled until we came to a better internal discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, we need quick decision if we need to spend money or not. Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about it and join the conversation in the work group, which I think you're already in. But I think that's the place to get a resolution. It's pretty complicated. So.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Translations, we've got website translation, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian. Thanks for that. Anybody want to comment further on translations? Okay, thank you. New submissions, the only one we've got there we'll put in from Jerry, which is tip 31. Is that correct, Jerry?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll look at that one in the next meeting. Yes,
I got a question. Do you guys feel like we would need a tip? There was some discussion last night. I think Douglas, Marlon, and I, and probably some others over on the reservation of BP account names. Do we need a tip for that, or can we just talk about it here?
We need to allocate the funds to create the accounts, or agree on it.
That'll come out of the 25,000 that we've already allocated.
Can I summarize for people a little better for people what we're discussing?
Sure, absolutely. Sorry.
So the question, there has been a question about how do we and that could have been addressed through a tip, but has now been suggested as a beneficial process by network maintenance, and so I think it can come out of that group. But here's what the proposal is: every participant on the Telos testnet from the beginning stage is to be allowed one BP name that would be created for them prior to network launch. The goal of this, and by the way, that does not just mean BPs in this group. That means any BP, people outside of this group as well, who have participated in the Telos testnet. On the EOS launch, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not names should be created for BP candidates who had invested a lot of brand awareness around their BP name over the many months of the testnet. It was agreed not to do so, and what actually ended up happening is there was actually some name squatting by people who quickly picked a famous BP name as theirs in hopes of getting some votes. Now, in our we have anticipated this actual situation in our reg producer agreement, which means that a BP name can be rejected from use if it existed on the Telos testnet, and that is actually extended also to anyone who is on the first month of any BP main on the first month of the EOS mainnet. This is the goal of this clearly is to reduce voter confusion so that our voters feel like they understand who they are actually voting for and are not duped by somebody who went in and scooped a name. So we are suggesting allowing every BP group that has participated, whether or not they are in this group, to create one name with the understanding that, number one, this is a small recompense for the very useful service that all these BPs have done in helping us build our testnet over the past several months. And some of those are not receiving founders reward pools. So all they're really be getting for that is the chance to save their name. Secondly, this allows BPs to go forward and begin their advertising now, which is probably a good time to do it, with advertising their name, with the understanding that no one would go in and scoop that name for them in an attempt to fool and defraud voters on the Telos system. Thirdly, if people did that, those names would be a useless action anyway, because the BPs can reject any name that existed on the testnet. So it would be fruitless. It would just remove that name. So it doesn't actually benefit anyone to do this. It only confuses voters. And then finally, in our discussions, so these were reasons why we were debating it, but we're probably going to have to offer a tip. But in discussions with Jerry last night, he mentioned this actually could allow, by doing this, we would be able to preset the known several known BP candidates, which actually allows us to more efficiently launch the network and possibly even avoid a problem that has happened in some edge case in launch tests. And because of all these reasons, particularly though, because there's a technological advantage to the network and extremely low cost, roughly we'd be creating probably fewer than 60 names, this seems like it has a high value, really no cost, and no one at the expense of no one, because even if somebody went in and created a name like Good Block TLS, they would not be allowed to use it because Good Block used that on the testnet. So by the terms of the Red producer contract, they would be prohibited from using it. So there's no cost. It doesn't infringe on anyone's right. It's not a benefit solely to us in the contributors group. It's the benefit to anyone who participated in the testnet, and it offers a technological advantage for the stability of launch. So for all those reasons, I feel that we can just have network maintenance and the launch directors suggest this, and we can just accept it. I don't know that it even needs a vote. We can just include it in the process, unless anyone here wants to debate that or think it needs a vote.
I don't need to debate it, but I just wanted to ask the question As you may be aware, we've got EOS UK and Telos UK as two separate brands and two separate block producer handles on the EOS and Telos network. And I just wondered your thoughts on how I should try and deal with anyone, preventing anyone from grabbing our EOS name.
So great question. So I would say what we're proposing is one reserve name per. So you would pick the one you actually wanted to use, since you can only run an organization can only run one block producer anyway. Because I believe EOS UK was registered on the EOS mainnet within the first month of launch, and likely even before, it would be grandfathered under that hand. We reached out to EOS block producers of note. So somebody couldn't come in for that with that name for that reason, not just as much as they couldn't come in with EOS Canada or something and try to defraud users, thinking that they were like the EOS Canada. So I think you're covered under that scenario, but everyone only gets one. They have to pick the one they're going to go with going forward, and this allows them to begin their advertising campaign confident in the fact that the users will not be defrauded by somebody who scoops in and steals their name.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Can I ask? Does anybody have an objection either to this concept or to the adoption process of coming through the launch directors or network maintenance team as a pro launch function?
Sounds good.
No, everyone's still talking about voting and abstentions, so you can sneak anything through right now.
Well, I don't think it's a sneak through, but I mean, I think it's good that we're discussing it. I don't think it arises to a vote. I think it should be their decision. But I want to make sure, since there's 41 people on this call right now, that maybe we could for a minute not divide our attentions to anything else. We're discussing this. Let's just, if anyone has any problem with this, then please speak now. Otherwise, I propose we hand this that we hand this power to them to decide. It seems to have many benefits and no drawbacks. But if anyone sees a drawback, now would be the time to.
I just wanted to say this is timely because we're making a list of BPs right now, and the BPs being able to put their voter name in there pre-launch would be very beneficial. So I think we should act on this right away.
So is the comment then, if to use the example given, if they choose EOS UK over Telos UK, then that means Telos UK is available for someone else to use and vice versa? Is that what that means?
No, it actually doesn't become available because it would still be confusing to voters. My guess is that EOS UK would use Telos UK would use Telos UK. Roger was asking a clarifying question to ensure that somebody else couldn't come in to use EOS UK in this specific case. And the fact that those are grandfathered in for a certain amount of time means that they wouldn't. That grandfathering doesn't last forever. I don't have the text in front of me, but it's a reasonable protection for just such a thing, or in case Generios or somebody who hasn't actually been on our testnet, somebody who hasn't been on our testnet, but the voters know well. A third party couldn't come in and take theirs. So yeah, it's really to the benefit of the voters and the BPs and everyone, and the network launch. I'm still waiting. Anyone? I'm sorry, Jim. I should hand this over to you, but if you could ask if anyone has.
No, Douglas, go fine. I'm finding it difficult to understand the concepts of the voting system at the moment. So yeah,
maybe we.
I mean, we can add that to the agenda for next time, and if anybody wants to comment.
Well, without there's without objection. Maybe launch directors could just formally propose this without it having to be a tip.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't seem like there's any major objections to it, does it? So.
Right. Would we be able to? Would we be? I mean, I don't know if we need a tip or not, but it sounds like beginning to collect these names is something that needs to happen now. I would propose, based on what James said, and just understanding the ongoing the process, that we begin that process. If people feel this requires a vote, that's fine. My personal, I'm advocating here, so let me step aside and just put on my own personal hat and say, I think if the launch directors say this is good and there's been there's been ample opportunity but no objection here, I would just move forward, because something, you don't really have to vote on everything, sometimes.
Please, no, let's not vote on everything.
Yeah.
From our side, I don't see any downside to this. So
okay.
Agreed.
We'll work with whatever, and we'll create another Google form, I guess, and start collecting people's names appropriately. And then we'll also need to be making contacts just to verify ownership of the ones that are not a part of this group.
And we'll need their public keys for owner and active.
Yes.
Okay then, guys. If I can trust everyone to do that, I think we can skip over number 6, because we've got a call for that particular event tomorrow. We've got our third no-go call tomorrow at 1600 UTC. I've got the next meeting confirmed for this particular group, which I think will stay alive. We may decide to kill it and rename it depending on the no-go launch. But we've got the Friday the 2nd of November, 1600 UTC, unless anyone's got any objections to that. We will be, I do believe that tip 27 did not reach the required 2/3+1 majority of votes cast. Okay, I will double check that and put it in Slack. Douglas?
I'm seeing a lot of discussion in the side. Can we just, you gave a very clear layout of the voting process, but I'm just curious, is there anyone on this call who wasn't 100% clear that typing the word abstain was tantamount to typing the word no in its effect on voting?
The key point there is to its effect on voting. You are abstaining, and people keep putting in the chat that I say you're voting no. I'm not saying you're voting no. I'm saying that the system of 2/3 majority, which is facts, I'm not saying it, it's facts, that a 2/3 majority +1, you have a number for the yeses to get over. There is a line that the group creates by the number of votes. And abstaining is, the act of abstaining is to vote, and I made that abundantly clear. So
I feel you did, but it seems like there's questions. Like, to actually abstain is to not vote. To type the word abstain is effectively, while not casting a no vote, the effect of it is identical to casting a no vote. And people are talking about this, and I thought you made it very clear. I know a few people may have come in later, but I would not want this to go down. My personal feeling is, we spent all that time talking about it. I don't want this to go down under a cloud that people still didn't understand it, or I feel like there's a few people here who did understand it, but don't agree with it, even though it's clearly explained. I just would like to understand. I don't want this thing to be voted under a cloud. I would rather have everyone understand, express whether they did or did not understand that point of it.
Yeah, so it is clear that there is a considerable number of people who did not appreciate the fact that they put abstain, that they meant no. So I would really call another vote on tip 27, and I apologize if this call is going to go on for another 5 minutes. So everybody who is now fully understanding that abstain means no, So if you intend to abstain, please do not vote.
And but then you gotta redo all the votes then.
That's ridiculous. Come on.
No, but this is a borderline. The other ones are almost unanimous.
Nothing. So I went through. Oh, I'm sorry, Zad. I went through the votes, and so with this system, one of the things about the system is nothing can pass. You know, nothing can pass accidentally, right? There can be no false positive. There can only be a false negative in something failing when it was not intended to. And it did not seem, that seemed in my review of the past votes, this is the only case I could find where that seemed to be the case.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would like to call another vote on tip 27.
I want to bring up one other thing too, and so if there's enough people that are actually abstaining, we need to actually have a quorum then of people that want to vote on it. So if there's 41 people on the call and there's less than 20 people that are actually voting on it, I don't think that's a fair vote either. If there's a ton of people that don't have enough information or enough of opinion to actually make an informed decision on it. Because then you have a small group of people actually passing legislation that enough people don't have enough information on or haven't reached a decision.
Yeah, my thinking on this, if you are on the call, then